The WeRPN Workplace Violence Prevention Toolkit, Modules 1 and 2, developed by WeRPN with the support of the Government of Ontario. Overview. The Workplace Violence Prevention Toolkit is made up of the following modules. Module 1, Introduction. Module 2, Workplace. Module 3, Responding to Harassment and Bullying. Module 4, Actions for Dealing with Harassment and Bullying. Module 5, Assertiveness. Module 6, Teamwork. Module 7, Emotional Intelligence. Module 8, De-escalation. Module 9, Responding to Dementia. And Module 10, Mental Health. Module 1, Introduction. This section includes important definitions for you to know and understanding how and when harassment and bullying occur. Registered practical nurses have long voiced their concerns about the risks of violence in their many types of workplaces. Violence against nurses can occur from patients, clients, residents, families, visitors, other nurses, or other healthcare providers. The COVID-19 Recommendations Report, generated by the Ontario Public Sector's Employees Union Registered Practical Nursing Division, noted that in the national survey on the work and health in nurses, practical nurses were more likely to report having experienced physical assault by a patient in the past year than other categories of nurses. 29% of participants, of which an overwhelming majority were RPNs, reported that they were victims of physical assault by a patient in the past 12 months of work. That number rose to 44% when emotional abuse was factored in. A 2017 survey from the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions found that 54% of respondents were emotionally abused by a patient. 85% had experienced verbal abuse, and 31% were more likely to experience a perceived lack of respect compared to other nurses. The evidence speaks overwhelmingly for the need for RPNs and their employers to have concrete tools to prevent and address violence in the workplace. The first place to start in identifying and dealing with violence in the workplace is to define what constitutes violence and abuse. The International Council of Nurses 2007 includes the following definitions. Abuse is a behavior that humiliates, degrades, or otherwise indicates a lack of respect for the dignity and worth of an individual. Sexual harassment is an uninvited and unwelcome verbal or physical behavior of a sexual nature, especially by a person in authority towards a subordinate, such as an employee or a student. Violence is defined as being destructive towards another person. Workplace violence is defined as incidents where staff are abused, threatened, or assaulted in circumstances relating to their work, including commuting to and from work, involving an explicit or implicit challenge to their safety, well-being, or health. Horizontal violence is interpersonal conflict among colleagues, which may include antagonistic behavior such as gossiping, criticism, innuendo, scapegoating, undermining, intimidation, passive aggression, withholding information, insubordination, bullying, and/or verbal and physical aggression. It may also be known as lateral violence or nurses eating their young. Harassment and bullying are unacceptable. Some examples of harassment are physical abuse, such as unwanted physical contact, verbal abuse, such as anonymous calls, digital means of contact, using offensive language or innuendo, telling offensive jokes, name-calling, or spreading malicious rumors. The Royal College of Nursing in 2015 notes that types of harassment may include written abuse, such as letters, social media posts, emails, or graffiti, which are often anonymous, and/or displaying offensive pictures or posters. It may also include obvious and direct abuse, such as mimicking the effect of a disability or explicit threats. Note that this list is not exhaustive. Covert abuse has been defined as a form of mistreatment and manipulation that may go unrecognized. It is not obvious or readily apparent. Unlike physical abuse, covert abuse may target a person's emotions, self esteem, and emotional well being. An example of covert abuse is a new nurse on your unit who's been tasked to set up all the equipment and paperwork needed by a physician to complete his visit. There's a group of nurses who have been on the unit for some time and know what's needed by the physician. They help the new nurse to set up everything to ensure that everything is ready to go. The group of nurses removed some of the instruments before the physician comes to the room, leaving the new nurse to look incompetent and to explain where the instruments are. This type of covert abuse is known as gaslighting, which may lead to experiencing doubts about your perception, memory, or reality due to subtle manipulation. Bullying is characterized by overbearing mistreatment and domination of others. Bullying can come from many places. It could come from your manager, your supervisor, or your colleagues. Some other examples of bullying may include changing your work responsibilities unreasonably without justification, constantly changing work deadlines or work guidelines, or deliberately withholding information to affect a colleague's performance. There are many types of bullying, but bullying may include sadistic or aggressive behavior over time, exclusion from meetings, humiliation or ridiculing, criticism in public designed to humiliate or belittle, persistent, unwanted criticism even in private, or treating colleagues and others as children. The WeRPN Workplace Violence Prevention Toolkit, Module 2, The Workplace, created by WeRPN with the support of the Government of Ontario. This section includes Workplace Violence Overview, Legislation, Bill 168, and Workplace Violence Risk Assessment. Violence in the workplace can take on various forms: physical, verbal, emotional, and can be long-standing. It's not specific to one form of abuse. Violence called horizontal violence is a reality in nursing today. Who are the perpetrators of physical violence in the workplace across the healthcare system? Commonly, it can be patients, clients, residents, and or their families, and it tends to be more physical. Could be intimate partner violence, or IPV, or colleagues and supervisors, which tends to be more psychological. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms indicates that we all have the right to be protected from violence. But what is acceptable? The fact that it is seen as a reality doesn't mean it should be accepted by nurses and their employers. Bullying and harassment are a form of violence. It is unacceptable and constitute a fundamental violation of human and legal rights that can lead to criminal prosecution and civil law action. In Ontario, Bill 168, the Occupational Health and Safety Amendment Act, about violence and harassment in the workplace 2009, is legislation that was passed resulting in changes to Ontario's Occupational Health and Safety Act. The Act strengthened the protection of workers from workplace violence and addressed harassment in the workplace. Bill 168 is also known as the Laurie DuPont Law, named after nurse Laurie DuPont, who was murdered in 2005 in her workplace through intimate partner violence by a colleague and ex-boyfriend, Dr. Mark Daniel, at the Hotel Dieu Grace Hospital in Windsor. The Act has raised public awareness of workplace violence not only in Ontario, but across Canada. Workplace violence means the exercise of physical force by a person against a worker in a workplace that causes or could cause physical injury to the worker. An attempt to exercise physical force against a worker in a workplace that could cause physical injury to the worker. A statement or behavior that is reasonable for a worker to interpret as a threat to exercise physical force against the worker in a workplace that could cause physical injury to the worker. Bill 168 defines workplace harassment as engaging in a course of vexatious comment or conduct against a worker in a workplace that is known or ought reasonably to be known to be unwelcome. Workplace harassment may include bullying, intimidating or offensive jokes or innuendos, displaying or circulating offensive pictures or materials, or offensive or intimidating calls, texts, and or social media. There are a variety of resources and tools for employers and workplace parties on the prevention of workplace violence and workplace harassment. Below are listed some resources for your review. We are all accountable for the prevention of workplace violence. Employers have a duty to care to provide a safe and healthy work environment, free from harassment. Employers must have policies and procedures in place to prevent workplace violence and threats to employees and to respond to these threats. Nurses also have a responsibility to ensure their behavior does not distress colleagues and or contribute to the issue. They must be aware of and adhere to policies set out by the organization regarding workplace violence and harassment. Don't be a silent witness. Events witnessed by another person. If you hear something, see something, say something. Stopping workplace violence. One way to stop bullying and harassment at work is to raise awareness. To assess your awareness, please complete the Are You at Risk for Workplace Violence survey prepared by the Industrial Accident Prevention Association in 2007. Take the time to self-reflect and be aware of your own behaviors. For example, using phrases like just kidding or you may have to pay your dues may mean that you are unconsciously contributing to the issue. Building cultural awareness and competency. Cultural competency describes the ability to effectively interact with people belonging to different cultures. Nurses must recognize that to practice culturally competent care, we must suspend our values, traditions, and beliefs while holding them close to providing patient-centered care. Don't be a silent witness. If you see something, say something. Speak to the affected colleague and engage in conversation with your supervisor and or manager to have the issue addressed. The College of Nurses of Ontario Code of Conduct is a valuable resource and is the practice standard describing the accountabilities all nurses have to clients, employers, colleagues, and the public. The code also describes what nurses must do to maintain professionalism, competence, and ethical behavior to deliver safe client care. All nurses are expected to uphold this practice standard regardless of their role, title, or responsibility.